Good afternoon. This will be the second video of the construction of this 8 by 32 transom window, and we'll stretch this out over a few days here because in the kiln we'll look 853 degrees. We're just going to take a peek in here. I've got two different pieces in there. There's the dragonfly and then the hummingbird, and the hummingbird is firing again because on painting color, large swaths of color, and when it fires it'll change color or soften up a little bit, so I needed a little bit more color in the flowers, and they may need to get fired one more time. Sometimes things get fired 3 or 4 times. Anyway, so while those two are in the kiln, the rest of today and overnight, I'll start this one. And I wanted to lay this out because we want to talk about this thing from the very beginning. This is going to be a piece with 3/16 lead came. It's relatively simple window, a lot of straight lines. And there is kind of the fly in the ointment, because straight lines just have to be straight. And I'll say this again. If you're going to cut all of this glass at one time, which is the normal way a stained glass window is done, they cut all the glass out first and then come back in here and fabricate it. Man, I've got to have these lines super tight. I can cut glass about as good as anybody. However, if I think I'm going to cut all of this glass and then come in here and start putting this thing together and it's going to fit perfectly, I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think that I evolved into this one piece at a time method because I was constructing a window that had a long straight line border. It was lead, and I was having trouble, a millimeter's, that's 10 millimeters right there. A millimeter is just too far to be off. So I was having a lot of trouble, and I thought, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I started building these windows panels one at a time, one piece at a time. And that got me out of trouble. And I'll show you how we're going to do this. Now, unlike a foil window, if people that follow me closely know that a foil window, I have the cut line. And let me hope I can find a pencil. Sometimes, oh, here it is. I cleaned up everything from doing all that painting, and I'll get it back out. On a foil window, this is the outside line, or the full size line. And then there's going to be another line here for the cut line. And on a foil window, I put my wooden frame in on the cut line because I'm going to build that foil window without any border material on the outside of it. And then I add the border material later. And in the last video or two on the owl, I explained why. So anyway, on a leaded glass window, I go ahead and we're not going to use copper on this, we're going to use zinc. But the zinc and the copper are the same size, so for this explanation, we're just going to throw this piece of copper in here, and I'll explain to you how I'm going to do this thing. So, because I put my wooden strips right on the full size line, that means that my zinc, and it will be zinc, not copper, my zinc 1/2 inch U channel is going to go right on that line. I'll come down here and 45 that U channel, and I'll put it right across there. So I'll only have these two sides. I'll have a full length piece of zinc running up this side. There'll be a 45 in it right there where I'm going to come across here when the window's much further along. And then the other piece of zinc would come across here. Now here's where I don't think everybody's so determined to get this part right. But you just have to have this square, because I'm always anticipating that a window or panel like this is going to go into a cavity, and that cavity is going to require you to be squared up on the measurements that you're building the window. So why not make that thing super square? That's what we're trying to do here. So it's 32 by 8. And so what I did, and you see I've got a couple of clamps here. Now I've got this thing screwed down already, but I had the clamps in here to make sure that I hold that piece of wood at that 40 or 90 degree angle here. So this piece, when I put it in, I used those same clamps. Came down here and got on the line, clamped it down, then came up here and clamped it to make sure that I have this screw in nice and straight. So we've got that side there right on the line. And what I did then is I come back with my square, right? And what we want to do here is we got on this bottom line right there. And I'll set this screw here. Then I had it clamped down. Then I come over here and I clamp it down again. And then I had a little hammer here. And I was tapping this thing until I got it exactly square. So now, this window panel, we know we have the outside perimeters square. Gotta be square. All right. Now the next thing, we'll say, since you're not going to cut all this glass prior, there's no pattern. Here's the pattern right here. There's no pattern. Man, I've seen people doing all kinds of stuff that just wear you out. They've got another pattern over this thing. Then they've numbered everything so they don't get lost. With this particular method, you don't get lost because you're only doing one piece at a time. So if we've got this thing laid out right, now is the time we find out, are we accurate in these lines? Because this needs to be straight up and down. And guess what? That distance there and that distance there need to be the same. So we're just going to use this piece to demonstrate here. I'll put the zinc in here after I get through with this video. But there's the U-channel that's going into this thing. And I'm looking down there at 36 millimeters. What that means is this glass should be stripped off the sheet that I'm going to cut it from. And I'll come back tomorrow or the next day. And it just depends upon these two painted pieces in the kiln. I've got to get them done before I really get rolling on this. But I didn't want to waste any time on this. That's why I'm on this, and they're in the kiln. Anyway, what I say, 36? We're going to strip off the glass that we're going to use here, 36 millimeters. We'll have a nice long strip of it. When we set that 36 millimeter piece in there, all I'm going to do, we find another, oh, maybe I got it in my pocket. Here it is. All I'm going to do is I'm going to have a sheet of this glass setting in here. And I'll just mark on that glass. And that's where we'll cut it. It'll be 36. Then we'll come over here and we'll put the lead came in, push the sheet in here, and mark this up. Now that should be, and we'll find out right now if we're off or not. If we were to measure from here to this line, it should be the same top and bottom. If it's not the same, if it's off a millimeter, we'll adjust and fix this line. It should be the same. Supposed to be. But that's, you want to constantly check yourself, recheck yourself, check yourself, because you don't want to find out when you get over to here that you've got a 2 or 3 millimeter change in the width of these pieces of glass. These should be the same. So if you get over, then you got something wrong, and you probably built it wrong to start with, and that error has just compounded itself as you've gone across here. So come back and let's just see how we're doing here. Okay, I'm looking at about 78 millimeters from the inside to here. Now we're not worried about that in respect to cutting any glass right now. We just want to see, is our drawing tight? There it is, 78. Okay, and what that means is that it's imperative when you draw one of these up, I don't care if you got a whole bunch of curls and swirls in it and all of that kind of stuff. If you have straight line border glass along the side of your piece, or in this case, the whole piece is all straight lines, you've got to make sure that these numbers correspond correctly from the top of the window to the bottom. If you stay on that, then you can't help but build a window that's going to be just beautiful. Now, I'll strip off this 36 millimeter glass right here. We'll set it in, and then I'll come back, hopefully, here. Well, it's going to be several days before I get back to this thing because I've got to get these two other pieces done. And then I'll show you how we lay this thing out and move across this thing, and how when we get done with this, we're using 3/16 lead, which is relatively narrow lead. There's only 2 millimeters. I'll show you what that looks like. There's only 2 millimeters. There's 2 millimeters right there. There's only 2 millimeters underneath the edge of that lead for you to get your glass. What that means is that you're just going to have to be an accurate cutter to make that window look well, right, good, and you're also going to need to be able to stay consistent. Now, I'll do some demos on how I'm going to cut this straight line and on a long piece of glass. We'll go through all of that. This should be a good learning piece here. I'm glad it's not super complicated. And when you start working in the small lead in these little areas like this gets a little more complicated than first meets the eye. So we'll figure this all out. Before this strip glass goes in, this piece will go in. No, that's Allie and her silly barking. We'll put this piece of glass in and measure it up. And we want to make sure we get everything straight. Okay, that's all I have on this. I'm going to do some work on this if I get... Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'll come back later this afternoon because we want to chronicle this thing being built, and so people can go back and look at these videos and build a leaded glass, the real thing, a leaded glass window for themselves. And there'll be a lot of information on this particular relatively simple panel that'll be of use to quite a number of people that are trying to learn how to get into lead. So I'm glad we have a more or less a basic window here. It's not too big, and we'll be able to show you all the steps necessary to build this window. If you follow me along and you can build this window, then you can build one 10 times this size. Okay, well, that's all I have. I'm going to fold the tent here, and I'm actually pretty excited to get into this thing. And we're going to use we're going to use some clear glass in this thing. And I'm looking at, maybe it's an optical illusion here, but I'm looking down here. Yeah. See, now I see something needs to be straightened out right now. In fact, I'm telling you, this is where, let me go from here. I'm going to look at something here. 110 and a half. Okay. This line here is perfectly straight and square with over here. But this line right here is wider. I can see it. And I would catch that as we move along. I'm right on about 15 millimeters here. And right there, I'm 16. So we're just a little bit out right here. So we'll fix that, move that line back in line with here, and I can see it right there. These are a little harder to draw than look. We're off right there where we intersect this spot right here. We're off just enough to throw me out a millimeter. I can see it right up there too. So all that has to be done is I erase this line, and then I'm going to look here and make sure I'm not thrown off right there. I'm off just a little bit right there. So we'll figure this out. But that's the stuff you got to watch for. And I continually measure across these things and make sure I don't have anything wrong. But I look down here. A millimeter's a long way for the work I'm doing. So I look down here and I could see that was wider than that. You probably can see it too. So we'll fix that. But when you start these out, you've got to have the basic part of this thing done perfectly. And then as you move across, you continue to check, recheck, recheck, and make sure you're not building a mistake into this window. I'm glad you saw that. Normally, well, I probably should have caught that on the drawing, but I've caught it now. So this is kind of my last step as I start to build, and then the checking, recheck, check, recheck usually bails me out of any problem. But we want to fix that. That's a full millimeter off right there. Okay, well anyway, that's all I have. Glad we can show you that. You can't be too careful with these. All right, if you have any questions, be sure and ask me. I'll talk back with you later.